Good afternoon. It's Monday, November 18 in Altoona, Iowa. Yesterday afternoon or early evening, I drove to Grinnell, Iowa, which is a bit over 40 miles from here. To the coffee shop in Grinnell, I heard Governor Bullock speak to an audience of about 50 people. For the first time, there was no press there. And in fact, I think I was the only person who recorded it. I put up the stump speech without an introduction because it's already 21 minutes. It's quite good. I recommend it highly. This video is the question and answer portion. Governor Bullock is very adept. He answered a lot of questions. He answered them quickly, and I think you get a very good feel for what his positions are by viewing both his stump speech and these questions and answers. Sitting next to me at the table in the coffee shop was a political science professor who has written a book on the Iowa caucuses. I believe it's titled Why Iowa? I ordered it on Amazon today and it should arrive day after tomorrow, and I expect to read it. He had attended a house party for Governor Bullock Sunday noonish, and he said there were about 50 people at the house party. There were also 4 media television cameras. One from CBS National, and he thought the other 3 were all local stations. That's a lot of media coverage for a candidate who is polling at 0. This coffee house presentation is what I'd been hoping to find in Iowa. It's a lot like Senator Klobuchar's bakery speech, although she had about twice as many people. Governor Bullock was personable. He's a good speaker. I think you'll enjoy both his stump speech and this question and answer video.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to know what you're going to do on day 1 for the environment.
Day 1 on the environment. Day 1 on the environment, a couple different things. One of which is I will sign a executive order. Montana, I'm the only one that's done this. That says if you want to contract. So what I've done as governor of Montana, if you want to contract with the state of Montana, you have to disclose every single dollar you're spending or contributing to influence our elections. Think about if the federal government did that, because they contract with dang near every company in the country or world. And I only bring this up before directly because George H.W. Bush, the first George Bush, when he was in the White House, said we're going to combat the greenhouse effect with the White House effect. Newt Gingrich, when he was Speaker, talked about the need to address climate change. You've gone through your floods. In the West, fire seasons are 78 days longer. Now when Republicans won't even acknowledge that climate change is real, we have a challenge. In addition to fighting the dark money, though, the first 3 steps I think are pretty darn easy. Rejoin Paris and fund its commitments. Right now we have states like mine and other states that have taken up the mantle because of Trump's pullout on this. Because we know that one state or one nation can't do this alone. Not even the auto industry wanted to deal with the rollback of these efficiency standards. That would be a day 1 or day 2. And also, from an executive side, as president, you have incredible authority even override your agencies. I tasked my land-based agencies, which is Forest Service and BLM, Interior, saying, I want you to be net zero emissions, carbon neutral by 2030, or even before, because they can also be an incredible carbon sink. Scientists say we got to be carbon neutral as a world by 2050. I think we can be US 2040 or even earlier. But I think the real hard work begins after those first few days, because we've got to make this climate crisis into a climate opportunity. And I say that not only because of the headwinds of Republicans, but truly when you have trouble imagining how you're going to get to the end of the month, it's hard to care about the end of the world. The federal government can play a significant role in as much as both investment and partnership along the way. I mean, we've doubled our wind in Montana in the last 6 years, quadrupled our solar, but the most antiquated piece of machinery throughout the West is the grid. It can't even take on renewables as it should. Agriculture has a significant role that can play in addressing climate. I forget which town I was in when, it was actually here in Iowa, and somebody said, "You're gonna make this stuff eating beef?" You know, where I come from, that probably wouldn't be too popular. But think about it, like when UC Davis even does a study, you put a little bit of seaweed into cattle feed and methane reductions go down. Dairy Council's taking those things. No-till practices. But invest in infrastructure. How is it that we can't even, infrastructure used to be a pretty darn bipartisan issue. That will help address climate. I think we can get there, and we have to get there. We don't have another 30 or 40 years to wait. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
You're talking about how each generation should be doing better than the last one. What would they do with children under the age of 5 in terms of pre-K, childcare, all of the administration, all of that they look like?
Yeah, so the question was each generation doing better. What do you think about ages 5 and below? And it really struck me, I'll tell you a longer story. So my oldest now is 17. She was the first year of full-day kindergarten in Montana. She had this teacher named Mr. Wolf. Mr. Wolf was a legend in Helena, Montana. He taught 4 of my wife's siblings. And it was his last year teaching, but he said to me, "I can do so much more with these kids now. But so many kids already don't have a shot." And how is it that at 5 years old, right, your life can be more or less shaped and defined by what happens in those first 5 years? Well, when 90% of a child's brains develop before they even enter kindergarten, where if you're not kindergarten ready, you're half as likely to be at grade level by 3rd grade. If you're not at grade level by 3rd grade, you're 4 times more likely to drop out of high school. Where a quality preschool program costs more than college tuition in a lot of places. With my overall education plan, I've said, look, we should double our investment in the K-12 system, recognizing that, you know, the federal government only pays about 9% of your K-12 budget, but we have to have universal access funded at the federal level to a quality preschool program. And it's not just ages 4 and 5, and we have to look at the first year's initiatives as well. Because if we don't set at the courses, we got money for first time ever funding quality of pre-K program in our state. At the courses level, go to your state prison. And yeah, there's co-occurring issues in life, but at least in Montana, over 80% of those kids didn't graduate from high school. We're not at least addressing that. We're never going to get the next steps. Yes, sir.
I'm going to apologize for asking a pretty pessimistic question.
It's okay, I live it.
Which you said that the next election is the most important. I said I was worried that the last election was most important because it enabled Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell to cram the federal judiciary with really conservative judges who basically want to act in the interests of the Republican Party rather than the law. They almost overturned the ACA a few years ago before Gorsuch and Kavanaugh were appointed. I'm curious, if the Supreme Court were to decide to strike down common sense gun laws if you were elected, if it were to strike down other healthcare reforms, or try to keep the federal government from engaging in economic regulation, it's pretty uncontroversial, what would you do? Would you consider things like term limits or adding new justices to the court?
Sure. Yeah, and I think that the first question and what's happened to the judiciary, and I'll directly address that, is so deleterious, so problematic to our country. But I don't know that the institutions of democracy in the republic, I think it can survive 4 years. I don't think it can survive 8 under President Trump. Directly to the judiciary, like I've actually gotten to argue in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, and for a geeky lawyer, that's like the Super Bowl, right? And when I was up there, I wanted to believe that it was somehow a separate branch that was above politics. But what Mitch McConnell did with Merrick Garland demonstrated that's absolutely not the truth. I don't, from my perspective, I'm not a big fan of the filibuster generally. I think it impedes action in DC, but I think the idea of the filibuster for the judges before it was thrown out was a good thing. What we do going forward, I think, is twofold. I would look at actually expanding the U.S. Supreme Court from 9 to 11. I don't like the idea, personally, of term limits on justices, because I think that there are times where a justice finally grows into an understanding what the gravity of his or her position is, and that takes some time. I think also that, never before have we just been having, it used to matter if the American Bar Association gave you a non-qualified rating.
Yeah.
And now they're just jamming through judges time and time again. I think it's fair to actually look at what the district and circuit court caseloads are, and expand some of the judges in our district courts and circuit courts as well. Yeah.
You called Israel a trusted friend and partner. Do you think they'll take that as carte blanche to continue their annexations and borderline human rights violations?
No, I don't. I think historically Israel has been a trusted friend and partner, and I think that we have to get back to a two-state solution.
Okay.
And
so you support a Palestinian state?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Can you talk a little bit about what you would do about the gun violence epidemic?
Yeah. I am a, like 40% of households in this country, I'm a gun owner, I hunt. I've also been, my family's been personally impacted by gun violence. I was in my last law school class. This was in 1994. I'm living in New York City. I get pulled out, and I had an 11-year-old nephew shot and killed on a playground by a 10-year-old. At the time, that was the youngest schoolyard shooting in our country. Now, unfortunately, if a 10-year-old killed an 11-year-old, it wouldn't even make national news. I'll never forget, so I'm sitting in my office after the Vegas shooting. And the president can ask us to lower flags, and governors actually get to choose whether you lower the flags. And I'm like, I don't even know what to write in this proclamation. And one of my coworkers, a staff member, said, oh, we now have a template for mass shootings. I've lowered them 9 times since Parkland, or since Vegas, 7 times since Parkland. Quarter of the times I've been asked to lower the flags. And that includes Veterans Day and everything else have been for mass shootings. If we could ever look at this as a public health issue, not as a political issue, it's not that hard. Well, it still could be a challenge, but we know what we need to do, right? The vast majority of NRA members think universal background checks make sense. Red flag laws, being able to remove a gun from a household after going and seeing a judge. Indiana passed a red flag law. That's not a fuzzy thing of a liberal state, right? I mean, I'll give you 30 million reasons why we've made zero progress. It's the $30 million that the NRA has dumped in to Donald Trump. When I was growing up, the NRA was a gun safety, hunting, and shooting organization. Now it's nothing more than a dark money field organization to tear people apart. I'd also add another thing, like we should do some safe storage laws. We should soften schools as much as harden them, meaning you have to have mental health in schools. Dick's and Walmart no longer sell assault weapons. They're not used for hunting. They're not used for self-defense. There's no reason we continue to sell them as well. I've called on gun owners to find, I've never met a gun owner that doesn't want to keep their family safe, or horrified like I was when my youngest started 6th grade last year, and at the end of his first week, I'm like, what did you learn? Oh, now I know where to go in case of mass shootings. Kids shouldn't have to grow up with that. And there are pieces, if we could look at it as a public health issue, that we know would make a difference. And I think that's the direction I take it. Sir.
So where do you stand on USMCA?
Where do I stand on USMCA? Well, I don't know quite exactly what it looks like as of this last round of negotiations. First, there's a reality. I'll step back, then I'll directly answer. Trump has kind of made America first into America alone. Like, we can't make sure that we have access to trade just by blunt instrument of tariffs. We are 5% of the world's population. We need other markets along the way. Somebody, a farmer, said to me, because we grow a lot of wheat in Montana. Like if Montanans had to eat all the wheat that we produce, every living Montanan, even that little baby there, would have to eat 40 loaves of bread a day. I think it was good to renegotiate the UMCA, or the NAFTA, because, like, let's be honest, this was created before there was even this thing called the internet. So you have to upgrade. I think going forward, we need to also, though, recognize that it's pretty easy for labor to move over borders. It's pretty darn hard for workers too. And we spend about 20% of any European country on even trade adjustment assistance. So we have to have labor standards and we have to have environmental standards in all of our trade agreements. And that's why the only way I hedge is I'm not sure what USMCA, I was against it from the initial iteration, but I think they've been working on both the labor and environmental standards.
Thank you.
One more.
Well, what about the 10-year monopoly on the drugs that's in that USMCA?
Yeah.
We need to lower drug prices.
We do.
That's going to lock us into a problem.
We do, and I don't know, I mean, part of my hedging was there's been negotiations going on even since then, right? Now it's just on the biologics of the drugs. I mean, it is crazy to me that we can't even negotiate prescription drug prices. It's crazy that we get locked in. And they say that, well, we do it, like, the US has to pay more because look at all that research and development that occurs. It's so important to do that research and development, but let's be honest. There's more advertisements on TV, more money being spent on that than there is the research and development. So I agree that we have to do things when about 17% of all healthcare costs go to prescription drugs. And the VA first started getting to negotiate drug prices, I don't know, it was about I think a decade ago. First year they saved $650 million. The US is the largest purchaser of prescription drugs, the federal government, for Medicare and Medicaid. In certainly the country, I think the world, and we have to be able to actually negotiate prices down. I'll close again. Thank you for coming out on a Sunday. Thank you for your attention. When I got elected governor in 2012, my kids at the time were ages 6, 8, and 10. They've been the youngest in 40 years as far as being part of this whole governor's thing, at least in Montana. We move in the governor's residence. My 6-year-old son kicks a soccer ball. It bounces off a painting. Somebody in the house goes, you know, that painting's worth $250,000. I'm like, take down all the darn paintings, right? Because we have to live there. But at the time, and my legislature was 2/3 Republican, we're deeply, deeply divided. Didn't feel as much anger as we feel at this point in this country. But during my first day of the state, I said to the legislators and everybody gathered that, I said, you're gonna hear different noises from the governor's residence and even my office. And that's the sound of young kids. And we as elected leaders have to recognize that our kids learn from our words and our deeds. And I said then, our kids are watching. I believe that more true today than ever before. At some point, we have to ask, what are we providing for that next generation to aspire to and be inspired by? We have to figure out a way, no matter who wins this election, assuming that we as Democrats are successful, there's still going to be deep, deep divides in this country. We have to get back to being that more perfect place where we can hold up the institutions of government and the dialogue that we have amongst one another in a way that hopefully will make our children, as they're watching, believe that we can do better. We can be that country. And it really does all start in about 78 days. Your participation matters. I appreciate you both coming out today. I'd appreciate if you'd be with me for the next 78 days. Thanks so much, and thanks for
If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. A thumbs up is always appreciated. Thank you for watching.